Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Cold War, written by Teleros. Shevarishly tried to wiggle his way even further into the corner of the seat as the noise level in the bar rose still further. Why had they chosen to meet here, of all places? There had to be high-class places his contact could have chosen. In point of fact, he knew them all, after a local year on the station. So why this dingy, miserable watering hole? Another glass smashed to the sound of laughter and the Uluprani roars, and Shevarishly hoped the situation wouldn't turn violent. If the 12 Homeworld's embassies were here found out he'd been injured in this place, well, the damage to his reputation, maybe even his career, didn't bear thinking about. "Someone been hitting the acid a bit too much," said a voice beside him. "Ah!" Shevarishly's bald body convulsed in a brief spasm of shock before he brought himself under control. "I don't know whether to ask you how you did that or why "Sorry," the figure replied. "Figured it best to not draw attention to myself." "You okay?" "Yes, thank goodness." Now that he calmed down, Shevarishly turned to get a good look at his contact. A human female clad in a dark purple figure-hugging environmentally sealed bodysuit and transparent helmet. A small backpack housed the suit's power supply and air processors, and it looked like one of their civilian models, meaning it was only about as dangerous as the Uluprani power armor. The human herself was from one of the paler nations, though her red hair and green eyes were unusual, as was her height. She looked to be barely 5 feet. Still, she appeared nice and bilaterally symmetrical, and from what he could see, everything appeared to be close to the ideal proportions and ratios for a human female. So he tentatively labeled her as attractive and filed that bit of information away. Quite how attractive she was, he had no idea. It wasn't like she had any sexy antennae fronds or bioluminescent crest, but there was interspecies relations for you. Beat being like the unisex terrestro at any rate, he thought. I'm sorry, what did you say when you got you?" "I said it looks like someone's been hitting the acid too much." The human jerked her head towards the Uluprani at the bar, who were stumbling around and into Barstools and Barstool equivalents incoherently. "What's he done? Downed a bottle of orange juice or something?" "Lime juice, I'm afraid." "Almost sorry that we won't be able to see this," the human said wistfully. "Oh, I forgot. I'm Annabelle, by the way. Annabelle Connor." She stuck out her hand in greeting. "Shevarishly," he replied, taking it and trying not to wince at a firm handshake. "Perhaps we should find some place a little less public, though." Annabelle gave a shrug. "There's no sensors in here, unlike the fancier joints, but you're right. It probably won't be long before someone gets hurt and the police get called in. Do you have access to the docks?" "Yes, you have a ship here?" "The Penshurst, docking at Bay 774. You'd best bring an environmental suit and grav harness, though." "Oh, yes, of course, would." He paused, working out the maths. "Half an hour will be okay." "Perfect," she said, smiling back, though thankfully without showing her teeth. "Come on, whoops." Her hand flicked out and caught half a glass bottle sailing towards them and deposited it carefully on the table. "Pretty easy in this gravity." Ushering Shevarishly out of the pub, her binocular vision sweeping back and forth for other threats. She stopped just outside and looked around. "Dock 774, got it?" "Dock 774, Shevarishly repeated. He picked up the habit from watching the spaces of the 12 Homeworlds astray aboard the warships. Repeating orders or key information back like that was rather more unusual amongst the diplomatic corps, but it helped him on more than one occasion since he stripped into human territory. "See you there." Approaching the Penshurst, Shevarishly couldn't help the sinking feeling from welling up inside him. It wasn't exactly a rust bucket, to use the human phrase, but it wasn't far off. Even from this distance, the hull was pitted and scarred from micrometeor impacts, and several parts had plainly been patched up by hand. Still, he had a job to do, and he was trained diplomat to boot. If he couldn't put on a brave face for this, he had no business in this line of work. "Hey, there you are." Annabelle, waiting outside the airlock, waved him over and keyed in a long string of digits into the keypad. The airlock slid open with a muffled hiss, and she led her apprehensive guest aboard. It was only when the inner airlock door had closed, with a kind of screeching gears and pneumatic hisses, that indicated that it was on its last legs. and Annabelle waved him quickly through into the center of the ship that Shavashli realized just what was going on. There behind a door labeled Reclamation Plant was another airlock, a well-maintained, noiseless, and very clean airlock. "You'd be surprised how useful this is in my line of work," Annabelle said, as she removed her helmet and shook her red hair free. "Mind the step now. It's set to double the station's gravity, but there is guest quarters down that corridor, completely separate life support and gravetics." "That is very kind of you," gasped Shavashli, laboring under the sudden increase in his weight. Fates, he'd have to be careful to even sit down in this hellish gravity if he didn't want to break anything. "Come on, it's not far. That's it," continued Annabelle, coaxing him down the corridor. Shavashli's baggage followed, floating along in mid-air. Faint static discharges around it as some kind of force field kept the air away. Humans came from the only known Class 12 Deathworld, and to this day nobody had been able to develop anything that could let them breathe the same air as most of everyone else. At this point, few thought that they'd ever be able to do so. Earth's microbes were just too rapacious and too hardy. His own government labs had been sterilized, then sterilized again, this time with the staff inside, and finally launched into the local star. Thanks to some freakish nanite-devouring UV-resistant bacteria the humans called strep. Apparently, all humans carried around various strains of the thing all the time. At that point, even the famously stubborn 12 Hellworld Science Directorate had had enough. Stepping back into normal gravity made him feel almost light-headed. But he recovered quickly and looked around the quarters. There weren't much, off-white walls and floor, a simple bed good enough for most species, but ideally suited to none. A combination of water and sonic shower in the bathroom, and an adjustable desk and chair in the corner. But under the circumstances, he was surprised it was good at all. "I must admit, you had me fooled when I first saw the ship," Shavashli managed. Once he'd gotten his breath back and had to look around. "I was beginning to worry what I was getting involved with." "Good. That means the disguise worked," came the cheerful reply. "Here's a tip, though. Take a good look at the drive emitters next time. Nobody can do much to disguise them, and they're a surprisingly good working order for a ship that looks like it's about to fall apart." "What's the ship the real ship like?" From outside the room, Annabelle tapped the side of her nose for some reason. "Can't tell you that, I'm afraid. A girl's got to have some secrets." Cultural reference. "I think I understand." Shavashli looked around the room, then at the human standing just outside. Faint static in the doorway indicated another of the force fields keeping her air separate from his air. "So, if it's all right with you, I believe that we should get down to business." "I still can't get over the idea that they'd send someone like you with me," Annabelle said, her hologram sitting in mid-air by my desk. "I would have thought somebody from Astray would have made more sense." "There would have been, complications," Shavashli admitted, somewhat reluctantly. "The fact of the matter is our spaces are just less secretive than the diplomatic corps. And as for me, well, I'm accounted an expert on humans. I was with the first expedition to Earth, but I'm still too junior to get out of the job like this." His antennae drooped in embarrassment. "This is not my choice of assignment by any means, though I hope I've not been trouble." "Are you kidding? You've been great. I'm just sorry that you have to be stuck in a little room all this time. But say, do you think someone is trying to get rid of you? I mean, I don't want to be rude, but we both know that you're not exactly a soldier." "Get rid of? But why go to all this trouble?" "I meant, are they trying to kill you? Do you have any rivals?" Kill me? Shavashli paused for a moment. That seems a little extreme, to be frank. Still, when this is over, I think I will have a look into this more. If nothing else, I worry I'm going to be a hindrance to you." "You'll be fine as long as you stay out of sight," Annabelle replied reassuringly. "Anyway, what's the deal with these pirates, and what are they doing this far from your trade routes? I'd heard the Brits were snooping around here, but I doubt that's why." "We think they might be building up their resources out here before looking more richer pickings," Shavashli said. "They could hide any number of caches out here without the Ashtrays patrols finding them, not to mention ships, bases, all kinds of things." I guess. Annabelle didn't seem convinced, however, which worried Shavashli. She undoubtedly knew her job better than he did, so if she was suspicious, then things were definitely not good. "Well, we'll be there in the hunting grounds in a couple days, and I'm betting they won't like what the Penhurst will do to them," she grinned, her eyes lighting up eagerly, and despite himself, Shavashli shivered. "Oh, this will be fun." Fates protect me. Yes, I surrender. I surrender. Please don't shoot. We'll open the airlocks for you as soon as you wish. Just... Pretty neat, huh? Said Annabelle, smirking at one of the holoscreens. The computer-generated image of a Kashindi captain had required a considerable amount of time for the geeks back home to get right, especially considering how little material they had to go off. But it turned out that having a thriving movie and computer gaming industry was useful for more than just entertaining people. It's certainly very impressive, agreed Shavashli. His attention was focused on the second holoscreen, though, which showed the bullish grey scales of the pirate chief bearing down on them. The Yoranthids were a people from a low-gravity homeworld, and under normal circumstances eminently reasonable neighbours, provided the ashtray was there to discourage them from accidentally wandering over the border at least. But their recent civil war had driven many of the losers to piracy, and this was undoubtedly one of them. They're not closing. 10 light seconds is a bit much for a grazer. I don't think gamma rays diffracted that much. Or was I mistaken? No, you're right, explained Annabelle. But a ship that small, call it 300 yards tops, is pretty fast, and even without FTL sensors, hitting something that small and nimble will be next to impossible. Really, I want them to get within a light second. There's no way they can stand up to my particle beams. Not with all the empty space they must have aboard for cargo. Oh shit. The Benhurst shuddered, where the terrifyingly loud klaxon started to scream, and it was all Shavashli could do to scramble away from the desk and towards his environmental suit. Bates, if they started leaking air, he didn't want to die. Not now. Not like this. He barely made it into his suit and under the bed, which, being bolted to the floor, was probably the safest place in the room for him. When he heard the door slide open and Annabelle enter, red hair flying behind her. Shoo? Ah, good. There you are. Thank God. You're in a suit. They put a few holes in us, took out the sublight drive and hyperdrive, plus most of the starboard, the right-hand side batteries. The ship started repairs, but someone clearly wants us dead. She had a pair of pistols at her hips, as well as an unpleasantly large knife on her lower left leg, and a couple of odd, flattened rectangular bulges atop her shoulders. Last thing I saw was them closing to board, though, so I think we've got a chance. But they won't let us bring the left batteries to bear, will they? Shamishli put back a yelp as Annabelle reached under the bed and pulled him out. No way we're going to be that lucky, but this ship's got a few other tricks up her sleeve. Come on. This is insane. Literally insane. I can't believe... Shh! Holding him firmly by one hand, Annabelle began running down the corridor in long bounds, the low gravity aboard the Yoranthid pirate vessel making it seem like she was almost flying. God, this thin air sucks. Can you read their language? No? I can't even read most of yours. Just French, English, and a bit of Deutsch, German. Tried Japanese, but it was too different to the others. Shavashli realized he was babbling and taking deep gulps of air, forcing himself to shut up. It didn't help that the Yoranthids were so damn big. He thought as he dragged along. The grey scaly centauroids were twice Annabelle's height, and half again as tall as he was. It made him feel like they were running around in some angry giant's den. Let's try here. Try, he hissed, torn between keeping his voice down and screaming at his human. Whatever she was now, captor, guide, rescuer, the fates alone knew at this point. Before he could say anything more, though, Annabelle let go of his hand, reached up and hit a large button by the door. It slid open, and from his position, just out of sight in the interior, Shavashli watched as she dived through the doorway, a pistol in each hand. Terrified, yet unable to stop himself, he risked a look around the corner. There were 4 pirates in the room, which, judging by the number of tables and stools, Yoranthids didn't use chairs. Must be the crew's mess hall. Into this had come Annabelle, followed by a loud crack of her pistols, as man-made lightning leapt from them towards the first 2 Yoranthids. The first was half suited up in armor of some kind, and his shields flashed with coruscating light as Annabelle's particle beam struck home. The shield generator gave out almost instantly, and a moment later the Yoranthid collapsed, an elongated smoking crater where most of his torso should have been. The second one had been unshielded, however, and Shavashli stared with sick fascination at the void where the alien's torso should have been. The scarred, babbling metal of the wall behind told of the monstrous violence of the shot. Shavashli ducked out of sight again. The pistols cracked again, and Shavashli waited for the sounds to stop. At least he didn't have to smell it, he thought, thanking the fates that his foresight in suiting up earlier. Forcing himself to stand. Why were his legs so weak? He staggered in, staring at the carnage. His head snapped up to the sound, but it was only Annabelle, stepping back into the room from what looked like the kitchens. All right, let's see if we can find that bridge. Wow, that was fun. Fun? You think this is fun? Sure, she replied, giving the room a quick once-over before heading for the exit. Honestly, my boss is probably going to blow a gasket when he hears about this, but I don't actually get to do this very often. She put one upper arm between thumb and forefinger. I'm not exactly the right build for boarding actions. Know what I mean? Yes. I remember seeing human soldiers once. They were much bigger than you. Males, too, I believe. Most soldiers are, Annabelle agreed, holding his hand and continuing to bound down the corridor. Let's see. If I was a bridge, where would I be? The pirates came out of nowhere, and Shavashli yelped in terror as they barreled into Annabelle from the side. 3 then 4 of the big centauroids charged the diminutive human, whilst the 5th turned and went for him. Overcome in terror, all Shavashli could do was curl up and offer no resistance as the alien lifted him off the floor by his neck. Despite himself, Shavashli looked over to see what was happening to Annabelle, and he began to wonder why he started hallucinating. Lambent arcs of electricity cascaded down the corridor as shield met shield, and the first pirate's eyes widened in surprise and fear as he felt the shield generator fail. He had little time to think of anything else, however, as a steel pistol, propelled by muscles developed and honed under a gravity 6 times his own, came crunchingly down on his forehead, pulverizing his brain. The second slammed the tiny biped's free upper limb into the wall, the full weight of the considerable mass slamming that slender, stick-like limb and the pistol it held into the steel wall. Whatever pathetically thin composite the creature was using for its suit stiffening to absorb the impact. There was another burst of lightning as shields clashed, but the rebound saved the Yothanid's generator from prolonged contact. It did not save him from the shoulder-mounted dart, which, being both unshielded and traveling too slowly to trigger the shields, struck his suit and squirted almost 200 yards of extraordinarily tough and sharp-edged fibers into his body at high speed, with results best left to the imagination. The third had the presence of mind to shoot at the tiny killing machine, but the size of his fellows worked against him, and his first shot missed. His second struck the creature's shields, and then the creature shot back. The fourth skidded to a halt, turned and ran. Halfway down the corridor he collapsed as another dart struck him. Stop! Stop or I'll kill him! I know you want the Cassindi alive! Shavashli wasn't sure if Annabelle had the translation software package for the Uranthid language, but the big creature's body language would be enough, he hoped. Now, all she had to do was... There was a now familiar crack, and Shavashli fell to the floor, the Uranthid's arm still about its neck. The big brute bellowed in pain, and then Annabelle closed the distance and put a fist clean through his skull. Jittering nervously, Shavashli hugged his knees, and he looked up at the human. She was barely recognizable, her purple suit thick with gore, her face covered in those watery secretions. Sweat, that was it. Her hair matted with blood and sweat, clingy to her face. Her right cheek looked discolored, and it looked like she might have a cut above the right eyebrow. But the worst were the eyes. They blazed with an inner fire that conjured up unbidden images of childhood monsters and creatures out of nightmare. Shoo! Hey, Shoo, look at me. It's all right now, understand? It's all right. Your suit okay? Shavashli forced himself to study his HUD. The little icon was still a reassuring blue. Yes, my suit's okay. I am okay. You're okay too, well, except for that cut. But I think you're okay, really, but not okay, though. And he's not okay, and I'm not sure if he's 1 not okay or 2 not okay people. It's a bit hard to tell, because he's sort of here and over there and up there and... Come on, Shoo. You can tell me later. Let's go find the bridge. Looks like they're guarding the entrance pretty good. Pretty briefly gone they got trained on the corridor. Annabelle was looking at the holoscreen she'd conjured up over one hand, looking at the view from one of the little darts she used as a makeshift scouting drone. Amateurs. Come on, we'll show them how the pros do it. I learned this from my big brother. He's in the Marines, and they do this kind of thing all the time. Shavashli stared deadpan as Annabelle led him into the side room and pulled the knife out of its sheath. Next, she did something to the pommel and drew out a long, thin cable, which she plugged into the little box in her back that housed the power supply. After a few moments, the blade began to glow, first red, then almost a blinding white, though the handle remained black and, apparently, cool to the touch. A warning light in his HUD flashed. A blade was putting out a lot of heat, more than his suit could really handle. But he watched anyway as the human beside him cut a hole in the wall, Twice she did this, bypassing the corridor entirely in order to get right up to the bridge, and without seeing so much as a single pirate. "That's a bit slow for getting in here," Annabelle said, adjusting the dial on her pistol. "This, on the other hand—" 2 cones of superheated plasma lashed out and clung to the wall. Electricity arced away, grounding itself in the space around her, whilst faint wisps of plasma washed around every direction. The steel wall blazed red, then yellow, then white, blaring and spitting goblets of metal back at the intruder. Thick metallic smoke filled the room, confusing Shivashli's suit as he stared at the scene from the safety of one room back. The internal wall gave way, and there were a handful of brief screams as those twin cones briefly swept the bridge. Annabelle switched over to minimum aperture quickly and stepped through the smoking hole. A few seconds passed. Shivashli heard another couple of pistol shots, and then she stepped back through. "None of them had shields," she said by the way of explanation. "Come on."
"You, whatever you are, we have your ship. Surrender now and we'll let you live. In one piece, even."
Annabelle looked quizzically at the face of the pirate leader on the main screen. "You know, Shu, this guy must be really dumb pirate. I mean, really dumb. Like, if you were someone like me and you had a ship like that, would you leave it without a self-destruct device?"
"You would destroy your own ship."
"Well, if I had to, sure, but here, I have a better idea. How about a trade? My ship for yours. I've already fried your weapons controls, and you've shot up half of my guns and engines, so I figure we can both go our separate ways, right? No need to make this fight to the death." The pirate chief looked down at the tiny biped, covered head to foot in the remains of his crew, caked in blackened soot and hardened droplets of metal from where it had blasted through the wall to his bridge. Hair matted, singed and ragged.
"You would?
Why? My ship needs repairs, and my friend here needs to see a doctor." She jerked a thumb to Shivashli. "Unless your ship has a stasis pod. Does it?" The pirate chief didn't need to be told twice.
"Very well."
"Okay, I'm going to have to put you in the pod with your suit on still, okay?"
Okay, yes, okay, good.
Shivashli nodded calmly as he followed Annabelle into the Penhurst, not really paying attention.
"Why did you let them go, though? I'm sure you could have killed them all."
Annabelle stopped momentarily, then wheeled out the stasis pod. "Climb in. Yep, that's right. I know it's a bit tight, but at least you won't feel anything until we can get you back to your people. After that, I want to find out who the hell told them about our mission."
"Then why didn't you kill them?"
Annabelle shook her head as she helped Shivashli into the stasis pods and made him as comfortable as he could. "Oh, I got them," she said, her voice strangely tired. "When they get back to their pirate base and see their buddies, I got them too."
I don't... how?"
She tapped to the side of her nose again. "Shoo, I never wore my helmet, not once. I bled on that ship, wherever it is now, and worse. When I checked in their kitchen, I found their food stores, and then I blew my nose." End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.